And I'll start where Dr. Mwiti left. As I begin, I remember going to somewhere in Machakos, and the facilitator of some workshop we were in, the first thing he told us to do is to greet one another. And the greeting was new because he said in Kikamba, Mtongoi, how are you? So Mtongoi is Warida. So the change began to understand that I was a leader. And then from there we began calling each other Atongoi in plural. As one, Mtongoi. As many, Mtongoi. So you can see change was beginning as we were in that workshop. We left knowing that we were Atongoi. So there was transformation. And as I stand here, I think the forming is continuing. That I'm Mtongoi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mtongoi.
Okay. Now, I'll quickly go to the overview. I think why we are mostly gathered here is because we are looking towards the next general elections, 2017. And this being the second general election under the new constitution, new dispensation. And we are reminding ourselves that's not 7th but 6th since 1991 on the return of many parties. And where we are telling ourselves that we need to focus really on the quality of engagement of these large constituency. I remember Paul talking about the youth making about 60%, and that youth includes also women, a part of the youth, and the women themselves that are not in the youth brackets, and then persons living with disabilities. And that's taking us to asking ourselves what are the behavioral and attitudinal changes that would be required for this large constituency to effectively engage in the political and electoral arena. I have a quick definition of what an election process is. And these are the steps of choosing persons to hold elective office or public office. And I go a little bit further and say of choosing the government, not just the persons, but making a choice of what government needs to be in place. And also a little bit further by choosing the preferred political party or candidates that would represent a given constituency. Constituency here, I'm looking at people. I'm running fast because I mentioned a little bit earlier that this is the 7th election. Looking around, I'm seeing this is not a new thing. We have been participating in elections. That's why I'm running fast, assuming that we have an idea of what we have around here. So when we look at the process, we are saying there, we are admitting that election is not an event. It's a process. It has many stages. It has many steps. And one of those steps is, or an election begins by dissolution of parliament. One of the activities that indicate we have elections is dissolution of parliament, and now the county assemblies that will need to be dissolved, and issuing of writs declaring vacancies for those positions. And the other step in the electoral election process is when we have nominations, either by primaries by political parties or nominations by the election management body, in this case IEBC. We have the campaigns for the given period. We have the voting process, and these are various steps. I've only indicated about 3, which are key, where we have voter identification, we have marking of ballots, and the casting of those ballots. And then from there, the next activity is counting of those votes as a process itself, as stages. And then we have the announcement of results. And here, announcements of results, I may be looking at the polling station in that order, because the next one may be the total announcement of the election results, maybe in the next stage. But that, in short, would be the election process. But on a broader context, we have 3 phases in an electoral process. 3 phases, where we can begin with the pre-election phase, and this begins with voter education. I'm looking at voter education as the first, because we are trying to come up with methodologies of raising awareness amongst these constituency of the women, the youth, and persons living with disabilities. And number 2, in that first phase, is voter registration, where people get into the register to be able to elect the person of their choice or the government of their choice. And I'm calling that as the first phase, where the second phase is what we have covered, and that is the election phase, with the dissolution of parliament, culminating in the counting and announcement of that vote. And then the third phase, we are calling it the post-election phase. And this is where basically you're tabulating all the results, and you're making the announcement of all those results. And if there are any disputes arising from that, the resolution of those disputes by the courts of the land or the tribunals that may be formed to arbitrate in all those issues that may arise. So we are looking at those 3 phases on the broader context, and this is what is called an election cycle, where we are looking in Kenya, it's more as a 5-year cycle from when we begin to when we end the third. But you can see there are linkages within there, so that you're not able to put a very clear gap in that. Because when you go back to the first one, voter registration, a continuous process. So it means even when we are looking at these others, at this phase, there could be also voter registration while the disputes are being determined. Now, the next thing we need to look at is the constitutional and legal framework for that govern the elections in Kenya. And we primarily look at the constitution. I remember Dr. Mwarimu here saying should be carrying the constitution. So I have it with me here. And we're saying this is where the election process in Kenya is anchored. The constitution, because the constitution, the first article, talks about the sovereignty of the people, which is exercised directly or indirectly through representation. And that is Article 1. And we have other key articles in relation maybe to our constituency. Article 81, which talks about the general principles of the electoral process. And within those general principles, we are looking at the inclusion of persons with disabilities as one of the principles. Inclusion as one of the principles there in the representation. And if you look at Article 81C, if you look at Article 54(2), again it talks about persons living with disabilities, and even gives a definition of what persons living with disabilities is. so that we have understanding of who we are relating to. Now, the other key article in the Constitution is Article 100. I'm just looking at a few of them, which compels Parliament to enact laws or registration that would promote representation of women, youth, persons living with disabilities, and other marginalized persons. You can see I'm homing on our key area here: women, youth, and persons living with disabilities, among others. Of course, we can also look at that article that establishes the Electoral Management Body as a key one, which sets up the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, among others. I'm just highlighting a few. We have other key laws that have been enacted to regulate the election process in Kenya. And the first one there, we have the Elections Act, which give guidelines on how the elections would be conducted, whether we are talking about the general elections, the referendum, or even a by-election. All those are covered in that. We're also looking at the Political Parties Act, because these are framework. Remember, we have mentioned about the principles a little bit earlier. And one is to ensure that that process has integrity. So ensure integrity of the process. Number two, to put in place all those mechanisms for a level playing ground for political competition and participation. Number three, ensuring, the objective is to ensure the secrecy of the ballot. Remember, in Kenya, we vote in secret. So your vote that is secret to be ensured. You are not known whether you have voted this way or that way, and should be respected in that regard. And lastly there, to provide mechanisms for resolving disputes, for resolving ensuing disputes. And the quickest you can remember is the Wetangula, which was resolved within the recent times. Was it this week, Tuesday? Yes. And then when we come to the next level in the election process, I'm coming now to participation of women. And that this is characterized by all levels of participation. I'll not quote many of them, but I'll go probably to just one case there. I was looking through the Senate here, just the level of representation. The Senate has 68 members. 68 members. But